Today's story will not have a happy ending. On the Galaxy News radio station that hosts Free Dog, occasionally one hears short stories about the adventures of daring Herbert Dashwood and his stalwart Gilman servant Argyle. I think you already know that these adventures are real, as are the main characters in the Fallout universe. Today we are going to break down what happened to Herbert Dashwood and his ghoul companion. In search of Herbert, you'll have to go to the Tenpenny Tower and find a decrepit old man. He is now approximately 70 years old, and in the course of his adventures he has managed to get rich, which has allowed him to live in the Tenpenny Tower. However, during his brave adventures, he was not alone, but with his friend Argyle, which must be older than Herbert for about 200 years. The first time they met was when Herbert seduced and stole Argyle's girlfriend. But afterwards, they somehow managed to become friends. Argyle decided to become Herbert's own servant and friend in the course of his adventures. After talking to Dashwood and asking him more about the radio show, you'll find out the name of the ghoul, Argyle. He has been in a lot of trouble with him, but at the moment he is not in the Tenpenny Tower for some reason. At this point, you can start the rather extensive unmarked quest and manhandled manservant. During the conversation, Herbert Dashwood will miss his partner, or the old days when he was younger. The lone wanderer might help Dashwood find out something about his missing friend. Herbert last saw Argyle at a settlement called Rockopolis, after which they separated. Before looking for Rockopolis, we need to understand a little bit about the predicaments and feats these two have accomplished. In total, there are 4 entries that you may have heard as you progress through the game, and eventually they build up one continuous storyline. I'll say straight away that after listening and understanding what the recording says, I have a very bad impression of Herbert. Also, I believe that these scenes were recorded only from Herbert's own account, and I have some doubts about them. Anyway, in the radio recordings you can only hear about Herbert and Argyle's last adventure, which implies something before that. It starts off when these two getting caught by slavers in the Paradise Falls, but they manage to get rid of their collars and escape. Before leaving the settlement, Herbert decides to rescue a girl that slavers have imprisoned in a punishment cell in the form of Pulowski shelter. However, after opening the so-called box, they find nothing in it, at which point they are caught by God, who is soon knocked out by the escaped lady. She'll introduce herself as Penelope Chase and say she decided to help Herbert and Argyle, who were spotted by one of the gods. Dashwood believed her immediately, and I think started paying attention to her. Argyle was wary, and then the first scene ends. After they got rid of all of the slavers that were chasing them, they continue their journey across the wastelands, asking Penelope various questions. Namely, they want to know what treasure she was hunting for and how she ended up in captivity. At this point, they are caught by super mutants, and while Penelope and Dashwood were intent to surrender, distracting super mutants' attention, Argyle sneaks up on them from behind and demonstrates the legendary move from Fallout 2 by putting grenades in the pockets of the super mutants, which instantly kills them. Argyle called this technique Shady Sands Shuffle and began to wonder if his friends were fine, even though he himself was close to the explosion. Dashwood asks how he would have survived without the ghoul, and the ghoul says he couldn't win without Herbert. Then Dashwood tries to change the subject, and at that moment they hear a child crying in the ruins nearby, at which point the second scene ends. That already raises a lot of questions, doesn't it? But let's get on with their adventure. Next, they are being chased by several more super mutants, but Penelope so fortunately notices that they are near a place where there is possibly a Rockopolis settlement. She only mentioned that she didn't know where it was, but Dashwood cuts her off halfway through, and trying to impress her, gave away the position of the Rockopolis. Herbert said he and Argyle have been good friends of the settlement. He uses a secret knock on the boulder, which is a kind of door to Rockopolis. Argyle is still wary and questioning whether to show Penelope the secret knock. But Herbert says they need to hide from super mutants. After they get inside the caves of Rockopolis, Argyle once again points out that giving away the method of entry to the safest place on the wasteland is not a good idea. As Dashwood tries to get Argyle's hopes again, Penelope shows her true colors and pulls a gun on the two of them. Penelope is not a treasure hunter at all. As it turns out, on the contrary, she is a slave trader. Moreover, she is a Paradise Falls Ataman and has been looking for a way to get to Rockopolis for some time now. She said that the slavers would be in Rockopolis soon enough, at which point the duo realize that Penelope is the glorified Black Widow. The moment the Penelope starts to say she wouldn't have found the entrance to Rockopolis without the help of these two, Argyle uses the Eagle Claw technique. Then, neatly and with just a single blow, separates Penelope's heart from her ribcage, causing her to stop breathing in an instant. Dashwood congratulates Argyle for saving them. Argyle doesn't react much, and at that moment King Craig arrives. The king was disappointed to see Dashwood again, and was shocked by the breathless Penelope. They told the king about slavers attacked, and he became enraged, ordering his guards to kill the pair, which caused Argyle and Dashwood to flee deep into the caves. They ran into a rocky ledge from which Dashwood nearly fell off, but Argyle came to his aid and helped him to escape from Rockopolis. What happened after these events is not known. However, I believe the whole story to be fiction written by Dashwood, and will try to explain why and what may have happened. The drama ends at the moment of the events of Rockopolis, and no further recordings exist. Dashwood lost his mate decades ago, and afterwards never gave hope of finding him, which to me is just maintaining the image of a brave adventurer. There are a few things to consider in order to find out why the events described by Dashwood are partially false or misleading. In Fallout 3, the events take place in the year 2277, and the events of this drama are most likely taking place in the year 2050, which is 27 years ago. In 27 years' time, Dashwood has taken little to no action to find Argyle, and lives peacefully in Tenpenny Tower. Here, he maintains a terminal called the Exploration Database, which also describes these events, and has some other information. Dashwood was born in 2207, exactly 70 years ago, and in 2241 he stole Argyle's girlfriend, after which, according to Herbert, they became friends. They went into various places, Megaton, the Underworld, and Rockopolis, as evidenced by the descriptions given in the terminal. Herbert can talk about how he once defeated a Yao guy with his bare hands, causing him to nearly lose one arm. In 2248, for some unknown reason, King Craig grants these two asylum, but due to an incident with his daughter, they are banished from Rockopolis. By incident, we probably mean the affair between Dashwood and Craig's daughter. Especially, Dashwood in the old days appreciated Blue Destiny brothel, precisely because of the varied list of services provided. In the year 2249, most of the employees as well as the head of establishment die of cholera, after which the place shuts down forever. Dashwood does not grieve long, but we remember the mistress of Blue Destiny. The events of the play take place in 2050, which is known from Dashwood's terminal, when Herbert brings slavers to Rockopolis. He calls the entire thing a minor mistake. The timeline doesn't end here. It describes that in 2251 he is awarded the title of Honorable Ghoul in the Underworld, which kind of hints that Dashwood continued to roam the wastelands for a bit longer after Rockopolis' tragedy. You can also find records of Mirrorworks, Feral Ghouls, Robobrains and Yao Guys, but they are not particularly interesting. In addition to this, Dashwood also described a megaton. What's important, a description of Paradise Falls is given, but there is no date. He just describes that they used to sell and buy anything that moved, and slavers weren't as organized as they are now. He describes Penelope with only one line, as a very bad woman. He also gives a description of a man called Churley, who became the head of Paradise Falls after Penelope, and is rumored to have eaten slaves he couldn't sell. So, what we currently have is a drama recorded most likely from Dashwood words, and a small timeline with additional events, also written by Dashwood. At this point, I'm not trying to put the puzzle together in a coherent picture, but just presenting you bits and pieces of events. Before we get to the most important thing, we need to talk about Tenpenny Tower, the place where Herbert lives. You probably realize that it's not inhabited by good people, rich, even very rich, but of a morally low standard. Tenpenny wanted to blow the megaton as it was ruining his view from his balcony, even though he couldn't see it much at all. Susan Lancaster is a young lady that used to be a slaver. After slitting the throat of her leader, she robs them and escapes to Tenpenny Tower. She wouldn't say that she used to be slaver, and now she provides intimate services in Tenpenny Tower, with the hope of just staying to live in a relatively safe place. Irving Chen, an old man who thinks that he is a descendant of China's leader, Chairman Chen. It's not known how he became rich. However, he can afford to visit Susan, as well as most likely Dashwood can do so. Susan is about 20 years old. Dashwood is in his 70s. What proves their affair is that Susan knows Dashwood's hunter nature in one of the dialects. The fact that he likes to be proud of his trophies. Susan mentions that Herbert often visits her, but she doesn't want to be his partner. And I will remind you that everyone in Tenpenny Tower has to pay rent to Mr. Tenpenny for their rooms, as does Susan, and she provides her services not only to Herbert. After finding the third piece of the puzzle, we'll head to the most important parts of the story. We'll need to get to Rockopolis, find the holotape and Argyle's body. Argyle's dead. His body can be found in Rockopolis. The settlement itself is on the west of the Casey Smith's garage. If you follow the Pip-Boy, just go left on the map in a straight line, until you find the tree with dyed flags. The boulder nearby will be the entrance to the cave. Actually inside there's a bobblehead that increases melee skills by 10 units, Argyle body, small decorations and holotape. The main part of the settlement is inaccessible, and it is obvious that there was a collapse inside during the raid made by slavers ages ago. Argyle's body only proves the fact that he is dead, but it doesn't prove that it happened 30 years ago. Also, inside there will be a wardrobe with pre-war clothes, a sofa, table and a bike. Table will hold a holotape and some reports. The holotape will say that slavers have prepared the last group of residents. Jurley, head of Paradise Falls, wants to get them to the north. Whoever recorded the holotape will also mention that the eyesight of Rockopolis residents is so terrible and he's not sure if they would be good enough. Their next stop will be the pit. Strangely, no holotape reports, motorbike or clothes were taken by the person to whom the message was left. Now, I'm going to start combining the information together and building up a coherent story. Let me say right away that these are just the conclusions I have come to based on the available information. The friendship between Argyle and Dashwood looks like a slavery. I don't see a reason why Argyle would need to travel with Dashwood, though Herbert says that the radio drama about his adventures make him look bad because it was made by Free Dog. After saying that he defeated Yao Guy, I don't believe that he is capable of fighting on his own. Argyle moreover lost his girlfriend to Herbert. Perhaps she only cheated on him, but still I didn't see any clear reasons or evidence of how they could have become friends. Also, who was the Black Widow? And was she a slaver's ataman? Argyle literally ripped her heart out. That moment may well have been staged. It's also worth taking into account that Herbert, although is an alcoholic who heavily depends on women's attention, but does not seem to be an extremely negative character. He also speaks well of the ghouls and is not against helping the Roy Phillips to move into Tenpenny Tower, even though he will be killed if he does so, and it's likely that he did indeed receive the title of Honorable Underworld Ghoul. The body of the Argyle we find is not near a cliff to jump over, and considering that Herbert saw Argyle almost 30 years ago, it is well preserved. I think he would have been a skeleton if he had died back then. Even though ghouls live a long time, I don't think their tissues regenerates after after death. Along with Herbert, Argyle visited the Blue Destiny brothel, which Herbert described as a place with hard liquor and soft women. Herbert himself not of high moral views, which also proves his affair in the age of 70 with a young woman. Just look at Herbert. You can't tell he's a man who can really fight. He's not even described in his own drama as someone who is capable to defend himself, but he's spoken about as the one who courted women, and thinks certainly not with his brain. All battles were mostly taken up by the ghoul, and the fact that Herbert hasn't sought him out in almost 30 years makes Dashwood look obviously bad, but in my opinion the bad guy there is probably Argyle. So, as for the story itself, it starts off when these two somehow getting into Paradise Falls. It is very hard to get the colors off, but they somehow manage to do so. Then the group heads off to Rockopolis, fighting off the super mutants along the way, where Herbert gives away secret of Rockopolis, and Argyle easily kills Penelope, after which Rockopolis is taken over by slavers. Penelope wasn't slavers ataman. The ghoul dealt with her so easily. She didn't do anything special during the battles with the super mutants. Neither did Herbert. Most likely the head of Paradise Falls at that time was Drury, that due to the old age was unable to fight back against Elijah Jones, and was killed in the nearest future. Drury is rumored to have eaten slaves he couldn't sell, and Penelope died from a single Argyle's attack. She unbelievably stupidly gave herself away by pointing a gun at them. I think she was just sent to follow Argyle and Dashwood, and in the future she was supposed to deliver information to slavers. It is also possible that slavers were following them, but they would not have been able to see which knock and which boulder led to the Rockopolis without being noticed, just because Penelope gave herself away. How easily she was dealt with by Argyle, and the fact that she didn't fight super mutants doesn't make her a Paradise Falls leader. Argyle and Herbert were fleeing not from slavers but from King Craig, who saw Penelope's dead body. It was Craig and his guards who chased them away. Herbert, considering his nature, slept with Craig's daughter and then ran away, which made Craig hate Dashwood. Plus, the murder scene didn't make Craig to like Dashwood, and then he decided to kick them out. Argyle helped Herbert jump and escape. After that, their paths diverge. There is no cliff in the cave of Rockopolis, at least not in the accessible bit. Apparently, the place of their separation is covered with rocks. An accessible slice of Rockopolis is suspiciously undisguised from pretty much anyone, with a rope of flux literally greeting you outside, indicating its location. Inside there is a sofa, chair, cupboard, radio and a bike, as well as some papers and a note to Rawlings, and the Argyle himself. The furniture inside isn't even overturned, and I think it was moved to the Rockopolis entrance after the raid on the settlement, making it into some sort of shelter. Who would want to have a motorbike inside a ruined cave and decorate the entrance to a secret location with flags? Certainly King Craig wouldn't do that, as Rockopolis would cease to be secret at that second. And the message on the table itself, which was addressed to certain Rawlings, was never picked up by anyone. Penelope's body is not present at the location, nor are any traces of the battle, aside from the collapse in the cave itself. In general, presenting all the inconsistencies, it is possible to create a detailed story. Staff and mistress of the Blue Destiny all died not from cholera. Argyle, in fact, is the Rawlings, to whom the message was addressed. Penelope is not Slaver's leader, but merely a raider sent to watch Argyle and be a safety net. Herbert is the most uninformed character in this story, and coincidentally the most innocent one. The way I see things. Long before meeting Herbert, Argyle had already been fishing for something bad on the wastelands, and it was most likely on the western part of the continent, as indicated by the fact that he called his crowning move of planting grenades a shuffle in shady sands, which honors a huge capital city of the new California Republic. How he knew this technique is not clear to me. Also, I see it as some kind of reference to the way of getting rid of thieves in Fallout 2. His past is also indicated by his unusually high skills in stealth, shooting, and especially hand-to-hand combat. At some point before meeting Dashwood, he escapes from the West Coast, being most likely wanted by the NCR. and ends up on the capital wasteland. Arriving to Washington, he joins slavers and makes enemies, gaining a very bad reputation. Next, he is with yet another girl he is not particularly attracted to, which cheats on him with Dashwood. It is possible that she was not Argyle's girl at all, but there is no sufficient information about that. Gould sees Herbert as some kind of whipping boy to blame. Why such a strong character has become a wingman rather than a lead is because he most likely made enemies and a reputation. Whereas traveling in tandem with Herbert, he wanted to secure an alibi and remain in the shadows from unnecessary attention, so that he could get to the Rockopolis. In 2249, Argyle most likely poisoned the entire Blue Destiny, for the reason that maybe they knew something about him. The fact they all died from cholera at one point doesn't seem plausible, and as I think, the girl Argyle was with at that point may well have been a brothel worker that was just seduced by Dashwood. Let me remind you that Argyle along with Dashwood liked to visit this establishment, and to prevent him from finding out the secret, Argyle poisons the entire place. Around this time, Herbert got an asylum in Rockopolis, after which he seduces Craig's daughter. All this time, Argyle had been marshalling and looking for a way to take over Rockopolis, and yet remain in the shadows from unwanted attention. At some point, for some unknown reason, they end up in Paradise Falls. The colors are frankly unrealistic to remove. However, these two succeeded, which points to the fact that the colors themselves were probably not working, because of the entire thing was pre-planned by Jurley and Argyle. Penelope was most likely a safety net that was meant to distract Argyle at some point. The whole time they were walking to Rockopolis, the slave traders were following them. Upon arrival, Penelope takes on too much and gives away the secret that she's a slaver, putting the whole plan in jeopardy, and Argyle gets rid of her afterwards. I don't think he rips her heart out, but he kills her nonetheless. Next comes the Craig and makes the Dashwood run. I remind you that the ghoul didn't jump over the cliff and stays inside the settlement. Argyle helped the Dashwood escape only for him to spread rumors of their adventure, so that Argyle would not be suspected. Back in Rockopolis, I don't think Craig would have killed Argyle, as he only had hatred for Herbert. Argyle leaves Rockopolis and gives it away to slave traders, who end up massacring and enslaving the entire population, after which they are sent to the pit. A bike, sofa, cupboard with pre-war clothes, records and a radio indicates that someone used the place as temporary shelter. After the massacre and capture of the inhabitants, the slavers destroy Rockopolis so that no one else will settle inside. Argyle, on the other hand, receives news about sending slaves to the pit and arranges some sort of camp at Rockopolis. Penelope's body is removed from the cave, as are other traces of the battle. They probably may have simply disappeared over time. Perhaps the ghoul himself got rid of them in an attempt to clean up the place. Why didn't Argyle leave Rockopolis and stay there? After the massacre and the capture of slaves, he obviously had to hide. For example, from Herbert, that continues to wander for some time, receiving for an instant a reward in the underworld. And the settlement, which few people know exists, is clearly best suited for that purpose. Why he flags it up, however, remains a mystery, as well as why Argyle's dead and when did it happen. I actually have two theories about that. Argyle absolutely did not die 27 years ago, in the raid on the settlement, as his body would have been skeletized by then. Maybe he became a problem to the slavers and they got rid of him. Or someone from his past eventually discovered his vacation and decided to end him up. Argyle plans to escape, but didn't have enough time, as indicated by the bike and his body. Also, it's possible that he started to lose his consciousness because of the time, or was tortured by the guilt, which honestly I doubt. He flags the cave to make it easier to spot, and end his 200-year story. In the end, Penelope wasn't Paradise Falls' leader. Herbert was just used by Argyle. He wasn't even capable of fighting off super mutants on his own, and definitely is not able to defend himself. Argyle was involved in some very bad things. He was chased by NCR, fled to the Washington, where he joined Paradise Falls slavers, and then started planning to take over Rockopolis. Argyle's name was actually Rawlings. His fighting, stealth, and shooting skills only proves the experience he has, that probably was gained over the years. Why is the holiday present? Why didn't anyone get rid of it? It is probably very prosaic. but he left at least something as a memento of the deed done, still hoping that Herbert potentially would find his body and discover what actually happened in Rockopolis. Herbert's non-involvement in the events in Rockopolis is also proven by the fact that he would sincerely like to find Argyle and will eventually give you the key to his safe with loads of useful items for the news about his lost friend. This concludes Adventures of Herbert Daring Dashwood and his stalwart ghoul-man servant Argyle. I hope that my version of the events looks logical and that you enjoyed watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click on the bell button and give this video a like, as well as leave your comment.